Under the trip. All righty. Well, today is June 23rd, 2022. And this is a program that we're calling Life, Love, and Legacy, What Thriving Families Do Differently. And it stems from my own experience of being involved in estates that developed major problems. And it was so painful and has exacted such a toll on my life. I really don't want other people to fall into the traps that my family did. So without further ado, I'm going to just launch into this. First of all, disclaimer, I'm not an attorney. I don't give legal advice. I'm not a psychologist. I don't give mental health advice. I'm not a CPA or an enrolled agent, so I don't give tax advice. I am a wealth manager, a financial planner, but none of what we say here should be considered or construed as financial advice, as each situation is different for each individual attending. So with all of that in mind, okay. So when I was 30 years old, and it was the night of August 4th, probably 1980, I woke up at about 2 in the morning and my heart was pounding. I did not know what was happening to me, but I did know that my mother was probably going to die that night. I'd been told that she probably was not going to make it to the next day, and I was 400 miles away. I was by myself in my little studio apartment, just graduated from college. And like I say, my heart was pounding. I really didn't know what was happening to me, but it was definitely a panic attack. Anxiety got the best of me. And I'm told we all grieve in different ways, but for me, the next 4 hours or so were really a roller coaster of me trying to calm down and getting my heart rate slowed, and then it would start to go through that vicious cycle of anxiety again. And it just went up and down for 4 hours. And in the morning, I decided I'm just going to go to the emergency room at Stanford Hospital, because I don't know what's going on and I don't want anything bad to happen. And maybe they can give me some drugs or something. Well, they didn't have drugs. They said, we don't give them out to people with anxiety. We advise you to talk to somebody. And I thought, well, I've got like 2 friends that are close. One of them's out of town and the other one is pretty distant from me. And so what I did not realize what was happening to me. It wasn't really conscious. It was just losing a person that I was very close to and who was my support and my comfort and my person I could share celebrations with. I learned more about it later, but the point of this is relationships really matter. And estates and transitions are a time when we're dealing with that. But we're also dealing with money. And it wasn't until maybe a year or 2 later that things started to go awry in my mother's estate with my brothers, or one brother in particular. And we wound up going to trial, going to court. That was the last time I saw him in person. That was over 40 years ago, because it just got really nasty and not good. And then to top all that off, in a few years after that, in the later 80s, my grandmother died, and she left about $60 million to charity, not to the family. She wasn't happy with the way the family was turning out. And I thought we were the worst generation ever. They talk about the great generation. I felt like we were the worst because we had screwed up and grandmother had some good points. Things just kind of drifted along for a while. And then one day I read a book called Preparing Heirs. And it said, basically, if you don't prepare the heirs to receive money and show them how to get along, share some values with them, it's not going to go well generally. And so often it doesn't. So our family really was not unusual, except for the amount of money involved. That's $60 million in the 80s. I don't even know what that is today, but it's a lot of money. But our family wasn't unusual and not really bad people. All the estate planning was done, and it was done well. It just didn't anticipate how people would behave, and it didn't prepare the people to succeed. There's a statistic that goes around in our field that 70% of all estate plans fail. I just saw an article this morning, funny how these things happen, where someone is questioning that statistic, which was done back in the 70s. And by failure, I think what they meant was loss of relationships, estrangement, loss of wealth, things not going well for the inheritors. It really is a time of dramatic change and emotions. And really, I'm here to prevent unnecessary pain and suffering of other families, because I realized if we had just been mentored a little bit, I think our trajectory would have been different as a family. I think we might have wound up with relationships, handled the money better, and so on. We really didn't get any training. I have a friend who's an estate planning attorney up in San Francisco, and he has something on his website about, you can pay me $30,000 now for a really good estate plan, or you can pay me $300,000 later to handle your court case when you fight about it. So these things are really common, and I just want to normalize the fact that we're all dealing with something. Also wanted to introduce you to my great-grandfather, Charles E. Dant. Charles Dant was a self-made tycoon, literally. He was worth about $100 million in the early 1900s, could be a couple billion today. He started selling scrap lumber off the back of his bicycle as a teenager, and later launched a lumber company that supplied a lot of lumber to Asia. It's based in Portland, called Dant and Russell Lumber. And they had to have a way to ship lumber, so he started a steamship company called State Steamship, which I don't know how many ships they had. I thought it was like 16, but looking on Wikipedia, they indicated like 30 or 40 different ships. So to put it mildly, he was very successful, and from all accounts, a good man, honest and hardworking and all those good things. What's sad is that the estate failed eventually, as I related, and I don't think he would have intended that. So let's talk about, that journey that I took, and where can we find some answers here. So I went from the challenges with the inheritance and the legacy, just the traditional way of thinking about it, the money. I realized that mentoring could have made the difference. I wrote an article about it, and I got picked up by a woman who's world famous in alternative dispute resolution. And I worked for a few years with her in developing protocols and courses for professionals. Really how families can stay out of court if they have estate planning disputes using interdisciplinary team mediation model. So it was a collaborative practice applied to estates and trusts. That was very useful, but I thought, I don't want to just be involved with people who have disputes, for heaven's sake. What can we do to prevent that in the first place and make this something joyous or a happy kind of process? And lo and behold, another one of my now friends happened to be presenting a workshop I was at, and I discovered that really he'd spent the last 40 years looking at this thing called connection with ourselves, with other people, with nature. And he had some very, very deep understanding, both intellectually, academically, and personally, emotionally, with this concept of deep connection, which kind of touches on things like mindfulness that are becoming accepted. But it turns out that really nature is a great jungle gym for developing our mental, physical, intellectual, and even relational skills and awareness. So we threw that into the mix, and basically at this point we're looking at something we're calling regenerative family dynamics, which is kind of like resilience in a family, but it's more than that. It's proactive, preparing the family to be creative and to adapt to a changing world. And it has to do with people more than money, strangely enough. Really, money is like the only thing that can easily be replaced for most families. The people themselves, their well-being, their confidence, their ability to connect with others, creativity, peace of mind, lots of good characteristics are the things that we really need in people. And they can go out and create the money and the wealth, essentially, if they're well equipped. So it becomes a multifaceted kind of a problem to look at, but actually the results that can accrue from pursuing this line of inquiry not only apply to estates, but apply to our happiness in everyday life and our well-being. And in a time of pandemic and loneliness and all those things, it's really important that people develop these skills, and they're really quite healing. Along those lines, the word wealth comes from an Old English word which really meant well-being. And that's kind of interesting. If you think about it, it's kind of paralleling what I'm saying, that if people are well, they have wealth, not just well physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and with purpose. I want to normalize disconnection. Like I said, our family was not unusual in the way we fell apart. It just turns out that our whole society and culture is pretty well disconnected. And we're seeing that playing out, unfortunately. So we have some ties to others, but we're not really good at it. We don't emphasize it. Culture in America is the Marlboro man, the strong, do-it-yourself, self-reliant person. That is not a whole explanation, and it really doesn't cut it. We need other people for so many reasons. And when it comes to estates and transitions, we need to be able to work with our families and solve problems. We need to find comfort there and resources and help in times of need, but we're really not good at it. So where do we learn about connection? It's like fish swimming in water. They have no idea what water is. It's just what we take for granted. And I see this play out when people have trauma or some kind of crisis in their life, and they want to isolate and back off from being with people. That's not normal, in my view. I went on this huge search for connection when my mother died, and I realized I needed that. the doctor was on the right track with, you need to find someone to talk to. Well, I did. I found lots of things: therapy, workshops where there was a lot of interaction with people and development of relationships. Best thing that I did really was becoming active in the men's community for personal growth and meeting on a men's team every week for 18 years. I really learned how comforting it is and empowering to have a place to tell our stories and to be heard, see other people go through their lives, learn from them, be able to access and honor the full range of emotions. And that absolutely changed my neurobiology and my plasticity in my brain. It worked on it. I can't explain it all, but I can tell you that it's maybe the best thing I ever did. So my instincts were right to connect with people. So my friend John Young, who I work with on the nature connection side of things, worldwide, world famous, speaks and does events in countries all over the world, takes people to Africa to spend time with primitive tribes, foremost expert in bird language probably in the world. He says that when we have connection, which we can talk about, but right now we can kind of leave it abstract, but this ability to connect with other people and we have these relationships, there are certain attributes that we exhibit and they're just naturally built into us. They don't have to be inculcated. They don't have to be taught. And I have them in bold here. I'm going to let you take a minute and read this attributes of connection, because this is straight out of John's playbook and certainly has helped me develop my thinking. So that's quite a list of qualities in bold there. I'd like you to just take a moment and consider, what if you had those qualities in your own life and in your family? Would that be something you could build on? And wouldn't it really help people find their own answers as they go? So give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, feed him for a lifetime. This really goes out to generations beyond us. And I've personally found that developing these gifts of connection, really, they're like blessings. I can't help but share them with others. So an example that I like to relate is, before I did men's work, I really didn't trust men. I thought they were dangerous. I was afraid of them. And a friend of mine said, hey, there's this men's weekend. You get to be in a room with 300 men for like 3 days. Oh, great. But I got to the point where I felt like I needed to do something different. And so I went. And it only took that one weekend. And I went from being scared of men to absolutely adoring men, respecting them, loving them, appreciating them. And a couple of years later, I was out in the national parks in Colorado, looking at some beautiful mule deer. And there was this biker next to me, and he did something where he embarrassed himself. And he's like a Hells Angel guy. And I just naturally turned to him and offered some condolence or some comfort to him. And it happened before I thought about it. That's just who I am now. I wasn't that guy before, obviously. I didn't trust men, much less bikers. But here I was extending kindness to one of these people automatically, reflexively. Another example, when we invaded Iraq, and I thought we should, and a friend of mine in the men's community thought we shouldn't. And I found that we were disagreeing, but not being disagreeable. The relationship was more important than the positions. And that was automatic. So I'm saying that when we awaken these gifts, which are really, I think, inherent in our makeup, we feel more alive, we feel happier, but we cannot help but share them with other people. All I can say is that's just the way it is. I don't have a scientific explanation for that, but we just feel rich and it feels so good. We really do want to share it. So can you recall a time when a friend or a mentor helped you activate your connective potential or opened up a big area of life for you? They probably were extending some of these attributes that they exhibited themselves. And you could feel the caring. I love this quote from one of my favorite meditation teachers, Kenneth Suarez, who is from Norway. It kind of works like this, and we've forgotten to do it. So let's refocus a little bit. As I've said, I argue that we're innately capable and imbued with these qualities that we want so much. I also personally believe that we need connection. It's not optional for human beings. We're just wired that way. We're happier when we do something for someone else than for ourselves. What's that all about? Not pure Darwinianism. Darwin actually said that in communities where people have good connection, they thrive better because they're there to help each other out, learn from each other. They survive better and they reproduce. So that's probably where we get all this. And when our needs are met, when we get that connection, we blossom. So I don't have a diagram of the attributes, but we did talk about what they were in the previous slide. And when we experience these things, hopefully we get them as a child, but many of us didn't because our parents didn't know how to. They thought, well, here, take care of my kid, just put him in front of the TV for a couple hours. That'll stimulate him. No, we need human attention and interaction. So when we get it, when we get the real thing, we can experience this transformation that's kind of magical, and science is beginning to catch up, but has a ways to go, I think. But neuroplasticity, we change, and we can change quite quickly, actually. Another tenet of mine is knowledge is not enough. Just knowing this exists ain't going to make a bit of difference. Can't learn about relationships from reading a book. You have to actually be in a relationship, something real. In financial planning, we know that financial literacy makes zero difference in people's lives. What? Thought it would make all the difference in the world. Well, a lot of people did, but it actually is when we are engaged, when we play games or we relate to others, and it becomes wired into us emotionally, and we experience the ups and downs. We develop the skill by being in the real territory, not reading a map about the territory. So unfortunately, knowledge of investing isn't enough to do well with it, and knowledge of these psychological principles really doesn't help. The experience is the thing. So we need ways to help families get there, and for people who are single like me, develop our communities and be able to keep them refreshed and going. So a whole bunch of a whole bunch of essential elements really that go into this work. Estate planning is a necessary part of this, but it's not sufficient because it really ignores the human side of legacy. And I'd argue that 90% of it, legacy or more, is really on the human side. You can have all the money in the world and it may or may not help. But we focus on money like it's the only thing. Oh, cut taxes. Yeah, that's good. Have a trust so this kid can't spend the money. Yeah, but it's all done in secret, and it's a great breeding ground for mistrust. Actually, some families know enough to have conversations with kids about it, but many, many don't. So the cost is people's lives, the amount of stress that people experience as they feel like they're on their own or they have battles. We have a lot of estrangement and alienation, loneliness, lack of resources. It goes on and on. You have to consider the human side of this, as I've been talking about. People need to feel safety and inclusion. Transparency helps build trust as well. And they need to have their own resilience as individuals, and they need to find themselves, not just be a carbon copy of dad just because he's successful. And again, we're developing skills, not just knowledge. So lots of things we can do. We have family practices like story of the day, talking about where these different recipes and the meals came from. Outings where we get together and do things together, taking on a family project. There are just lots of things that we can do that we can build into our daily lives or do at special events. Basically the experiences. We can explore the alignment of our values. If everybody in a family expresses what's important to them and their values about what a family is, there's a lot of overlap that you can discover and then build on and help the family begin to recognize the value of the family unit. So I think we need values included along with how-tos, and skills with money and so on. We need mentoring, and that's something that a lot of people are not great at. I tend towards this teaching mode, and really mentoring is allowing people to discover for themselves and to build on that and to ask the right questions, because again, we're really trying to develop individual strength. And looking for fun and going out into the, let's say, the night sky and experiencing awe, problem solving, like, okay, again, using the nature example, we want to build a fire, what are you doing wrong? How can I help you? In terms of families, could be looking at world problems and doing charitable work. And why do you think that's important? And let's practice these various things that we want to learn, not just talk about them. So then together we can be curious and we can explore and we can discuss. And we're building relationships. We're taking threads, turning them into cords, turning those into ropes, turning those into cables. It happens gradually, but again, like my men's weekend, we can also be shifted very quickly. So the timing for individuals is up to them, but we're never really done with it. But it's so rich. It's so rich. So starting now is good. Every step counts for sure. Everyone leads you just a little further. And I personally have been blessed to have gotten to know some of my heroes, my own personal heroes, people who definitely are world famous, lots of people in different disciplines, because we need a lot of disciplines to make this work. So we have resources, we have knowledge, We have tools. And again, I want to offer this to others as a gift because it means so much to me. We have family nature retreats. We have collaborative practice, trust in estates if people have problems or conflict. And again, Kenneth has a great quote here. It's almost as though he's been listening in on the work that we've been doing. Okay, so I would love to hear from you guys on what your concerns might be. I've listed a few of them here. What questions you might have, what contributions, because I don't have all the answers, but I bring hopefully some tantalizing pieces to the table to entice others to begin to explore this together. So I have not muted anybody, so if you're there, feel free to speak up. Anybody?
Hi, Peter, it's Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for the background information. It does make sense that discussing a long way ahead of time, people's idea about how estates are going to be dispersed would keep it from becoming a nasty surprise at the end, or at least bring on the table the things that may be at issue before you're doing it after the fact. Do you have any suggestions for, given that people are likely to come to you at a point where they want to make these decisions and may make investment decisions based on who they're trying to give their resources to? Do you have any suggestions about the best way to open up a conversation about this, where it probably is going to start with the idea of, we're trying to determine how we want to put our money and make it available later, so that you can get this discussion ahead of time, but also have people realize this is a long-term conversation and we're not just doing one thing in order to draw up an estate or a will?
Great question. I hear 2 or 3 sort of sub questions in there. One obstacle for some families is, how do we even initiate a discussion without seeming like, hey, we're after mom and dad's money, or the kids don't want to talk about our death because they just don't like the idea of us dying. You know, there are certain commonalities. Somewhere I've got an archived article on how to start a discussion, which would be oftentimes around, gee, I read about this family in the paper and this happened and it was a disaster. I don't want that to happen to us. Something like that, where you point to someone else, or you read this book and oh my gosh, got you thinking about all these things. And you know, we can have some coaching around that too. I think families need, again, this is going to sound self-serving, but it's really not meant to be. But I think we need an outside party for families to address certain issues, depending on the family, like maybe facilitating the discussion so that you have somebody who's just an objective witness collecting information. It really starts again with people's lives. So we want to start to build that awareness of what people's dreams are and what they have to offer and what they want to contribute. So it would be a gradual get to know you first before we decide how to handle the money. And again, you brought up a great point. This is something that evolves over time, and there's no guarantee of how it's going to wind up. That's another problem with estate planning as it's done today, is it's drawn up, and when the ink's dry, then it's frozen. So you really need the people to be adaptable and the structure to be adaptable as time passes, even after there's a transition. So I'd say exploring values first and then developing skills like practicing giving money away and talking about people's passions that way. It's kind of not a personal or uh, conflictual way of talking about things. It's focusing on doing good and doing good outside of the family. So the focus isn't on each other and trying to manipulate and get what we want out of that. Also, training kids on how to handle money, some of the basic concepts of compounding and debt and earning, and making those maybe the skills themselves, making those the goal of a period of trusteeship if there's going to be a trust. In other words, instead of making the trustee just a check writer and then handing out the money at some arbitrary age, having kids develop skills and having the trustee be the ongoing mentor until they reach a certain level of proficiency, and then they get principal. So I think who we are is number one, and preparing us is number two. And looking at those values and help, and then the family will be better prepared to have conversations about how to divvy things up or how to make decisions. And they can help protect each other as well. There can be something called a family bank where you're not allowed to go spend big amounts of money until you get agreement from other members of the family. I think dollar amounts are the very last thing that you want to talk about. They're going to change anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And actually, I think the issue about basic financial literacy is a big one, because I can't even say I feel particularly well versed in that. And it may be hard to list now, but if you have any list of resources that would be appropriate for different levels of people, starting with, I think it ought to be taught in schools, but then again, it's not going to happen right away. But basic things that it would be useful for, say, a college student to begin to learn about all those things you mentioned that you find are particularly approachable or useful, that would be useful. We have an adult son, and he really hasn't had to wrestle with much of this regularly. His jobs have sort of provided benefits without an explanation about what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots and lots of books out there, but if you have any of them that you think are really approachable and put down the basics in a common sense way, that would be very helpful, I think, to get that part of it started.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm more than happy to talk to the children of any of our clients as part of our normal financial planning services, because the well-being of the whole family unit is important, because everything's connected there. And it doesn't take a lot to spark interest in a kid, really. But I like to meet with kids and talk to them, find out where they're at, give them a few of the major insights that might pique their interest. We could even give families some kind of a exercise to do together. And I am developing some kind of basic course for young adults right now, so we could add your name to the list. We had a couple clients ask for that recently, and so I love to be the blessing for the kids, and let's find a way to do it that's efficient. I launched a project in 2009 during the financial crisis called the Financial Literacy Project, and we did presentations at bookstores and libraries around the Bay Area. It was really, really rewarding. And yeah, I wouldn't have a living if people totally understood investing and financial planning. It's a really big subject. In fact, we have a lot of subspecialties, as you know. So we're all in the learning phase. We're all ancestors in training. And I think taking time to talk about the value of the money and how long money lasts, at what spending rate, and looking at that long-term growth. Kids of any age can have a Roth IRA if they have any earned income from babysitting, doesn't matter. And I found that when you show people the power of compounding, that sort of gets their, I say this tongue in cheek, gets their greed going a bit or their interest in that. And they have to practice. I have a professor from Santa Clara who is one of the top experts in behavioral finance in the world, which is fascinating. We're beginning to recognize behavioral economics and finance is really important. Well, duh, it isn't just about the money. Again, it's about people. And people don't behave rationally. They behave according to what they believe, what they feel. And he said, doing financial literacy per se is not enough. It doesn't do anything when you teach it to, say, high school kids. They need games. They need some way to incorporate it into a context and interact with it, and maybe even problem solve with peers or with interested mentor. So this would be really fun to explore, and I'm sure that it's pretty well traveled territory, and there's probably some good resources out there. But if Austin, if you'd make a note to follow up with Steve, let's get something going for you that'll be fun for all of you. How about that?
That'd be great. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, I live for it, man. You guys are sort of my family. So here I am connecting, right? And teaching this or working in this area, working with people who are interested in connection. Those might be good people to be around. So anyway, any other questions? All right, I've got more for you, so no problem. We have some follow-on activities where you can go deeper with all of this. And I mean quality, valuable activities. So you're invited, and take what you want. It's just a menu. We're actually going to have a family nature connection fun day in early August here in Palo Alto. So if you're in the area, you can sign up. It's gonna be like $30 for adults and $15 for kids. So it's not really a profit center. It's an opportunity for us to begin to develop the conversation with the local community. We've got two people who, like I said, are world famous in terms of nature connection, and you won't believe what it's like to really begin to see what's going on and sense it in nature, from animal tracking to bird language to finding necessities for living. Really, one of our colleagues is just so beloved and world famous, and has helped start 500 communities around the world that practice these things. And of course, an author and lecturer, and he'll be there. So if you really want amazing little insights, he's great. And so is our other colleague, Lawner. Lawner Holden is from Alaska and grew up in the wilderness, taught himself most of it. He wasn't mentored like John Young was, but he's a healer and a sweet, sweet man, very, very good teacher. So we learn new ways of thinking, experiencing, awareness, and just being out in nature, which also is becoming a well-known cure or healing modality. So we will have some fun on that day. We offer family nature retreats, which are extended, say long weekends anywhere in the country. And actually the super duper one for billionaires, take them to Africa and hang out with the oldest culture on the planet, and hunt and dance and play and sing and track and all kinds of things with those folks, the Bushmen in Africa. But we can get together over here at the coast at Costa Noa and have a couple of days where we begin to explore these legacy questions with families and do it in a way that they're away from distractions and yeah, just take time out to be together. So valuable. Also, really intent on creating a podcast where we'll have the opportunity to cover lots of topics. And I've got amazing people, the best in the world. They just astonishing people in like 20 different disciplines. So I can't wait to do that. And we have an evaluation tool online. This one I'd recommend for everybody. It's free to you, but when people go directly to this website and buy it for themselves, it's $225. So it's called the Ultimate Estate Planning Checklist, and it really shows you where you stand on a scale of, I think it's 1 to 100, where you stand in terms of being prepared with your estate and legacy. And it covers this human side of things and the conversations, preparations with the trustees and executors and so on. Nobody gets a perfect score that I know of, and we all have work to do on it. But this actually gives you specific recommendations that you can take action on as soon as you finish it. And you can share the results with me, or you can just keep them private. But if you go to this website that's on this page, this is a handout that's available on the Eventbrite website, or email me and I'll send you a copy of this handout. It has the website there, willingwisdom.com/TWDBK. I can't quite read it. Almost. It's an eye test, but it's on the handout. So I really recommend that evaluation. It's an eye-opening exercise and helps get you pointed for your next step. This is our Family Nature Fun Day. It's also in the handout. We have 2 pages there where it's going to be and what time and so on. When we have a summary of the services that we offer as financial planners, because hey, some people might need that too. Some really good books. There's so many more I thought of after putting together this brief list. There's The Neurobiology of We and the Power of Showing Up, where Dan Siegel, who's a very famous professor, he's a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, and he's written like 50 books. Very well-known guy, amazing guy, talking about how we're bringing different disciplines together for our, what he calls interpersonal neurobiology. And he holds that we have many kinds of connections within ourselves, but other people are an extension of our own neurobiology. That's how important it is. And Raising Kids and the Power of Showing Up is an amazing book. I really recommend his work. Very accessible, very interesting. John Young, my colleague, wrote The Coyote's Guide to Connecting with Nature, which is really a book for people putting on events or raising kids. Has hundreds of different activities and then explains why they're important and how they help people develop. It's full color throughout. It's really an extravagantly beautiful book and well done, with 3 authors total. And this is where things get a little more far out, but also valid. If you want your kids to grow up with the right values or healthy values, this book argues that with the connection needs met and developing the internal neurobiology, that we're intrinsically Intrinsically, we have morality built into us, and we discover it. And that's more on the scientific side of things. Really fascinating and fun. So, solve so many issues. Contact information in here. My email address is peter.johnson@pwjohnson.com. So if you have any questions or you want to get copies of the handouts, you can't find them on Eventbrite, you want to make an appointment, just talk about what might be good for your family, I'm certainly here for that. I've also got a white paper that John and I wrote about this transformative context for family legacy work, how the interpersonal neurobiology ties into what we do, why it's important, how we do it. And I've got that quote up again, and that last slide with contact information. It's 11:59:18. Unbelievable. Any questions? Anybody want to stick around a little bit?
Hi, Peter. I do have a question.
Okay.
My name is Celine. I wonder if these days with families, you find a lot of disagreement politically that has to be handled before they can deal with the money.
I don't know what makes you think we have political disagreements in this country. That's just astonishing. I thought we were all just lovey-dovey.
Yeah, I loved what you said about learning to disagree without being disagreeable. I think that's something we all just really need to learn now.
Yes, we do. And it's good to know it intellectually, but we've seen this pattern of how people handle conflict and disagreement over and over and over and over, and we just slip into it, right?
Yeah.
It's just, we have to notice when it's happening, have to interject ourselves in the process. But I really have found over the years that I'm naturally tuned into things that are more important and less caught up in that as far as interpersonal.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing we can do, which is done in collaborative practice, is before you have family meetings, you set the standards for them, like no eye rolling, or you can leave the room, but just for 5 minutes or whatever it might be. Might be somebody's the appointed observer and notices when it's starting to slip into political discourse, and with the stated intention, I think intentions are important too, of we're here to develop relationships, and relationships are more important than the beliefs. They're more important than ideas. This is what we're here for. There's other times where we can get involved in those kinds of conversations. We're here to create something for ourselves, our own little private time away, if you will. One of our mottos for family nature retreats is time out together.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to create a space for ourselves, and you folks in the world of psychology can be a great help also in terms of moderating conversations. And that's why I think sometimes we need a little help. In the men's work, when we disagreed, we had a standard practice of the two men facing each other and men supporting them behind them, sometimes with a hand on the shoulder, just being there for them. And they could stop the process and ask questions or interject with their own huddle with their own little group. But the idea was make sure the other person, you're heard, because it's hard to shut up until you've been heard. But once you've been heard, it's really easy. That just is transformative by itself. So you make sure the message has gotten across. the other man owns what it triggers in him, and so on. And call it the communication wheel or whatever. Lots of ways to deal with that. We know we have to deal with it, but the benefits are so worth it. So I'd paint a picture of what we're after is the real gold. The other stuff's kind of fool's gold. And here's the rules that we'll make for ourselves in this.
That's really good. Thank you.
Amateur psychologist.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say some life wisdom there.
That is true. I keep finding nuggets as I get older, and 40 years of searching for the value of relationship.
Yeah, I thought about also, thank you very much for giving us the background. Two of my brothers didn't talk, and one died during COVID, during the pandemic. And man, the fallout of that is so subtle and strange. Yeah, they didn't talk, so they weren't fighting, but the emotional thing there around taking the money from a guy you didn't talk to for years and all that kind of thing, it really is wrecking my other brother that survived quite a bit. So whatever people can do to reconnect is useful, at least enough to agree to not really have much to do with each other.
Well, that can happen. That can happen. But we still need the skills in our own lives to get our needs met.
Yeah.
And this is a gaping wound of pain for so many. And so many have given up, or they don't know what they're missing when they take pot shots at other people online. So I think awareness will be a big part of it. And if I can help even a few families, which of course, my intentions go far beyond that. But if we can just help a few families, that'll ripple out in the communities laterally, and it will ripple down through generations. We want something that'll last for generations. It's being able to reinvent yourself, kind of thing.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you on the call. You may not remember that my former girlfriend and I used to see you for couples counseling, and the couple thing didn't work out, but I appreciate you being there.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
That's who I am, in case you didn't remember. It's been a while. Speaking of connection. Anyway, anybody else? Any other questions? If you have any thoughts later, email me. Again, I'm happy to send copies of any of this material out to any of you. Appreciate you being here and taking the time. Okay, it sounds pretty quiet out there. Must be shy people. Again, thank you. We will have more opportunities coming up to learn, to grow, to get together. So remember, check out the online survey, the Ultimate Financial Planning Checklist. Terrific. The author of that, by the way, has sold 1.4 million copies of his book called Willing Wisdom. So he's done something remarkable with that. So we have that online self-evaluation. We have, but you need our code to do it. And we have the outdoor event coming up, which should be really fascinating and fun. And maybe a podcast coming soon. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay, take care. Stay connected.